Well, friends, it's good to be with all of you here at End Times with Pastor Eric. Now, last time we were together, I showed you from the Bible that Satan is not currently bound in the church age as the amillennialist claims. Second, I showed you that Satan will one day in the future be bound for 1,000 years during Christ's earthly millennial kingdom. And number three, we proved biblically that Satan, when he is bound in the future, will not be able to affect anyone or anything, in contradistinction again to the amillennialist claims. Now, I want you to recall that we had left off last time with three questions, and these were challenges to the amillennialist. The first question was that if the amillennialist is correct, that Satan was bound by the finished work of Christ on the cross, then wouldn't the work of the cross be undone when Satan is released for a short time, according to Revelation 20, verse 3. Again, if the cross of Christ is what bound Satan, then isn't the releasing of Satan the undoing of the work of the cross? It seems a very difficult question, in my opinion, for the amillennialist to answer. Second question that we pose to the amillennialist is that if the amillennialists are correct, that the binding of Satan in the abyss is just Satan operating in his normal realm on the earth, how could the demons in Luke 8:31 ask Jesus not to send them into the abyss? They in effect would be saying, Lord, please don't send us where we already are. Now, as I'm going to show you today, that poses a very big problem for the amillennialist, because the abyss obviously isn't the earth, and I'll prove to you that the abyss is also not hell. So without the millennial kingdom, there's no place for the timing of the abyss. Okay, so therefore you have to have a future millennial kingdom. The third question, though, we had asked was, if the amillennialists are correct that Satan is currently bound, why does Revelation 20, verse 3 use the adverb eddy, which proves that Satan already was deceiving the nations during the church age? Now, my friends, today we're going to prove to you a couple of things. Number one, that the abyss is indeed a prison for spirit beings to go into. And second, the abyss cannot refer to either earth or hell, which necessitates a future millennial kingdom that Satan will be locked away in. We'll be proving that here today. So let's get started. For the sake of time, we got a lot to cover. Let's begin here by showing you the premillennial perspective on the binding of Satan. What I want to do again is read Revelation 20, verses 1 through 3, and I'm going to apply it how we as premillennialists understand it through this timeline. Now, friends, follow along. I'll pull up my pointer here when I need to use it. Notice here John wrote, he said, "Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding the key of the abyss, and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold of the dragon, the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he threw him into the abyss, and shut it and sealed it over him, so that he would not deceive the nations any longer, until the 1,000 years were completed. After these things he must be released for a short time." Now, dear ones, what I want to show you here is in the premillennial scheme, you and I are currently living in the church age. Okay, so this is the finished work of Christ on the cross, his death, burial, resurrection, and ascension, all completed by 33 AD. The sending of the Spirit subsequently happened. This ushers in the church age. And the church age will end until the coming of Christ. I've laid out before that the parousia is actually the 70th week of Daniel, and I'll be proving that in subsequent messages. Okay, so what we believe is that Satan is not currently bound. Again, he is not currently bound during the church age. That's why he's doing all the mischief. That's why he is the God of this age who blinds the unbelieving to the truth of the gospel, according to 2 Corinthians 4:4. That's why he's an adversary who prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour, 1 Peter 5:8. He is active during the church age. But what is going to happen at the beginning of the parousia, as the church goes up, I'll prove to you later that Satan, I believe, is thrown down. Well, then at the end of the parousia, not only is Satan thrown down to the earth, that's what happened in the beginning, but at the end of the parousia, Satan will be bound in the abyss. And the reason he won't be able to affect anything or anyone is because for this 1,000 years he'll be bound in the abyss, but he will be let out for a short time to lead one final battle, the battle of Gog and Magog, after which he'll be thrown into the lake of fire in the eternal states. Now, the proof that Satan will be, in fact, not be able to do anything to anyone or anything, he will not be able to affect the way the world is during this millennial kingdom, notice the language. Again, this powerful angel not only threw him in the abyss, but he shut it and he sealed it over him. And again, I talked about those terms, how they really are John's way of showing us that there's no way that Satan will be able to affect anyone during the millennium. Now, what I want to focus on today, though, is that the abyss cannot be the earth, and it also cannot be hell. Now, why is that important for the premillennial perspective? What I'll be showing you is because the abyss cannot be the earth, and certainly we know that we have demons and Satan that are roaming about the earth during the church age. Again, 1 Peter 5:8. Well, therefore, Satan can't be bound during the church age. But we also know that the abyss cannot refer to hell, where Satan will be bound in the eternal states. So here's the problem for the amillennialist. All they have in the amillennial scheme is the eternal states and the church age. Remember, for the amillennialist, the millennium is in the church age. So the point is this, listen carefully. If the abyss can't be earth, and therefore it can't refer to the church age, and it can't refer to hell in the eternal states, well, then there's no place that the amillennialist has to put Satan when he's bound in their scheme. Why? Because they have no future millennium. Their millennium is the church age. Let me illustrate this further by putting up another passage in Revelation 20, verse 10. Notice here, we have in verses 1 through 3, Satan thrown into the abyss. Again, that's during what we as premillennials believe is the millennium. But later, after that final battle of Gog and Magog, what happens? Well, the devil that had deceived the nations will be thrown into the lake of fire. That's during the eternal states. He'll never get out of there again. Okay, so here's the point. If the abyss is not the lake of fire, because he goes from the abyss to the lake of fire, well then, obviously Revelation 20:10 is referring to the eternal states. Revelation 20 verses 1 through 3 can't be referring to that. Well, the abyss also can't be the church age. Why? Because Satan still has access to the earth. Okay, so again, we as premillennialists have a church age, a millennium, and the eternal states. The amillennialist only has the eternal states and the church age. The millennium for them is the church age. So the point is, dear ones, they have no place to put Satan for this time of binding for 1,000 years. It's very problematic for them. So let's get into further details then and show you how this works out. First of all, what I want to do is teach you something of angelology and demonology and the divine council. The divine council are the angelic beings that God uses to rule over his universe, to rule over the heavens and also the earth. So when I talk about the divine council, this may be a new topic for some of you, but it really should be inherent to any biblical worldview. So let's talk a little bit about angels and demons that comprise the divine council that Yahweh, the true God of Israel, the only God, sits over. First of all, the good angels are those angels that do the will of God, his bidding. They did not rebel against God, and the implication is that they never will. That in some regard, their eternal state is fixed. They're never going to, in the future, rebel against God. That seems to be implied in the text that we read about the angels and the demons. Now, when it comes to the wicked angels that did rebel against God, we're going to call them demons. Where we're going to break the demons, the wicked angels, into two different components. The first are the active demons, which according to Revelation 12:4, Satan led 1/3 of them in rebellion against God. And again, that would have been in the past. Now, Revelation 12:4 doesn't give us the date, but it would. I believe it would have been probably prior, obviously, to the creation of Adam and Eve. Okay, so he had led this rebellion of 1/3 of the angels. Okay? Now, what I want you to think about then is think of these demons that are active, but you have a subset of demons that are inactive. In other words, of all the demons, that is the wicked angels who rebelled against God, you can break them into the active and inactive. Now, what do I mean by active? These are demons that can still affect people today. These are the demons that Jesus was casting out during his ministry, etc. Okay? But there are also inactive demons that are currently locked away in the abyss, according to Jude 6 and 2 Peter 2:4. Why? Well, because these demons impregnated women, according to Genesis 6 verses 1 through 4. And I know that sounds strange. It sounds strange to me. I wouldn't teach it if the Bible didn't teach it. Okay, but that is indeed what happened, and that's why these demons are locked away in a spirit prison called the abyss. And I'll handle the objections in a little bit, but let me prove to you exegetically that indeed there's inactive demons that are locked away in the abyss. Why is that important? Because it's the same prison that Satan will be placed into in Revelation 20 verses 1 through 3. If you don't understand these things, I don't think you have a coherent biblical worldview. Okay, because this is the biblical worldview that is inherent to the text and our understanding, I think, eschatology. If you don't have this, your eschatology won't make a lot of sense. For example, in Revelation chapter 9, when you have demons let out of the abyss, well, which demons were they? Why were they let out and not all demons? And aren't there some demons that are still affecting? Which ones were locked away? Well, this answers that. Okay, so again, this is going to raise problems for the amillennial and the postmillennialist. Really, the amillennialist and the postmillennialist have the same view in this regard. First of all, Satan will be bound in the abyss during 1,000 years, this future 1,000 years, the same abyss that the demons who had sinned in Genesis 6 are locked away in. Okay? Number two, the abyss cannot be the earth. Why? Because Luke 8:31, I'll be showing you that text in just a bit. Luke 8:31, you have the demons asking Jesus, please don't send us into the abyss. Well, remember, where were the demons? They were in a man on the earth. Okay? They had infiltrated a man who was on the earth. And so as the demons ask, please, Lord, don't send us into the abyss, obviously the abyss can't be the earth, because they would be saying, Lord, don't send us where we already are. Now, why is that a problem for the amillennialist and the postmillennialist, again, who have the same view? Because they claim that being in the abyss means Satan still has access to the earth. Well, he can't. Number three, the abyss also can't be hell. 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 4 and Jude 6 show us that the demons who had sinned are in the abyss waiting, being sentenced to the eternal lake of fire. Well, that's exactly what happens to Satan. Revelation 20 verses 1 through 3, Satan is in the abyss. Later, after the battle of Gog and Magog, into the eternal states, according to Revelation 20 verse 10, Satan is thrown into the lake of fire. Okay, so here's the point. If the abyss can't be the earth during the church age, and it's obviously not hell during the eternal states, well, that's all the amillennialist and the premillennialist have. They don't have a future 1,000-year literal millennial kingdom in which Satan could be bound. So, number four, Satan obviously can't be bound now. Number five, Satan will be cast into hell in the eternal states. Therefore, without a millennial kingdom, there's no time period for Satan's binding in the abyss. It's a big problem. Okay, now let's talk a little bit more about this divine council and the nature of the abyss. Now, when we're talking about the divine council, there's a term that's used in Hebrew called B'nai Elohim. It simply is the sons of God. And I want to explain this because some of you, as I say that, it'll sound in your ears like this may be what you might say offensive to God or downright blasphemous, because it seems to imply that there are other gods other than the only one true God, Yahweh, the God of Israel. Well, that's not true. That's not how the Israelites would have understood it. The Israelites knew that Yahweh alone was eternal, the non-contingent God, creator of all things. Every other being is a contingent being, including the angels. So the contingent beings must rely upon the eternal non-contingent creator. Okay, so the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, are the angels within God's divine counsel. And so these are the angels, whether they're good or they're bad. And by the way, we'll show you in future messages out of 1 Kings 22 that yes, God uses even the demons for his purposes. Think about the Apostle Paul. 2 Corinthians 12, does God not use the thorn in the flesh from Satan for Paul's good so that Paul wouldn't boast because he had seen such exceedingly magnificent visions of the third heaven? Well, of course God used it for his good. So God uses all the angels and all the demons to rule his universe, and we can be confident as Christians in Romans 8:28 that God will cause all things to work for our good for those of us who love God and are called according to his purpose. Even his demons he'll use for our good. So we don't have to fear them. He's in control of them. So notice here in Genesis 6:4, it talks about these giants, these Nephilim, who were on the earth in those days, and also afterward when the sons of God, again the B'nai Elohim, part of the divine council, came into the daughters of men and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Now, some dear ones, some people claim that the sons of God here is the godly line of Seth as opposed to the ungodly line of Cain in the Bible. The problem with that view is elsewhere in the Old Testament, the B'nai Elohim is clearly a reference to the angelic realm, this divine council. So let me prove that to you, that the view that the sons of God is the godly line of Seth has nothing going for it. And I say that to my own criticism because that years and years ago, when I was just out of seminary, that was my view. Okay, and my friend and colleague, Pastor Bob Dewey, helped me see the error of that. And so I repented of that and said, no, you're right, that's not right. So let me prove that to you so that you can also come out of your slumbers if you believe that the sons of God is the godly line of Seth. Notice here in Job 1:6, remember this is where Job is going to be tested and shifted by Satan. Because why? Because Yahweh, the true God of Israel, allows Satan to do it. He's in charge of it. But notice here in Job 1:6, it says, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. Now, who's the sons of God? Well, obviously, these are angelic beings. Why? Because Satan was among them. So if this was a movie, if Job 1:6 were a movie, it'd be like a movie saying, last Friday, or a mini-series, last Friday, what happened? Well, the sons of God came into the throne room, and Satan was among them. Well, what did Satan want to do? He wanted to sift Job. All right, so clearly God is using Satan, the B'nai Elohim, he's part of it, to rule his universe, to bring about his ordained will. Okay, that's how he does it. So the B'nai Elohim cannot be the godly line of Seth. No, they're clearly, it's a reference to the angelic realm. And by the way, you see the same idea in 1 Kings chapter 22 when God uses a wicked demon, a wicked spirit, to bring Ahab to battle and to destruction. Okay, we won't get into that now, but in subsequent messages I'll probably be showing you that. Now, I know this sounds odd that in Genesis 6 it's describing how angels, these are fallen angels, these would be demons, went and impregnated women. I know that sounds very strange, and I wouldn't believe it if in fact we don't have infallible commentary on it in the New Testament. This was the clincher for me. Notice Jude 6 and 7, Jude talks about this very thing. And why Jude is talking about this is he's concerned about false teachers who are engaged in boundary crossing. Okay, what kind of boundary crossing? Well, all sorts of boundary crossing for the false teachers, sexual immorality, but they're also trying to boss angels around as mere humans. So notice here what Jude says. Jude 6 and 7, he says, and angels who did not keep their own domain, but abandoned their proper abode. So stop there. Notice they didn't stay in their lane. These angels, they didn't remain in their domain. They left their proper abode. Well, stop there. What angels is he referring to? I believe it's Genesis 6. They left their proper abode as angels, and they went after flesh. So they did a crossing, as it were, of the species. They went from angels to humans. And that boundary crossing is something that God would not tolerate. So what did he do with them? Well, he's kept them in eternal bonds under darkness for the judgment of the great day. Now, everyone, my friends, notice that phrase, he kept in eternal bonds. That's the abyss. That's where that occurs. And so that's exactly where Satan is going to be kept, in the abyss. The same language is really used. Remember, there's a chain on him, according to Revelation 20, verses 1 through 3, where Satan is going to be bound in the future. These demons are already in the abyss. Okay, and they're going to be held. Now, by the way, you might say, well, wait a minute, Eric. Eternal bonds, if it's eternal, then why do they get let out and thrown into the lake of fire? Well, eternal bonds means that they are strong enough to hold these critters forever, these demons. But notice, that is not the end. They're going to go from the abyss to where? Well, one day they're going to go into the lake of fire. Okay, but the point is, this is strong enough to hold them in this spirit prison. I apologize, I've got gum. I've got a heartburn problem, so I chew gum a lot of times, so I apologize. It's coming apart of my mouth here. But now what I want you to do is keep reading and show you the link between the sexual immorality of Sodom and Gomorrah and that of these angels. Let me explain why that's important. Notice in verse 7, excuse me, I don't know if I went any further than the underline. So notice these demons, these angels, they're in eternal bonds. This is in the abyss. They're under darkness for the judgment of the great day. What's going to happen in the great day? They'll be thrown in the lake of fire. Okay, so that's in their future. Now notice verse 7, very important. It says, just as, literally in the Greek, it's hos. So you could say, just like Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them. So stop there. Notice there's a deliberate link with this just as, hos in the Greek. It's literally there in the Greek text. There's a link between Sodom and Gomorrah and the angels by using that hos, just as. Well, what's the connection? Well, notice the connection is, since they in the same way, homios, in the same way as these, indulged in gross immorality. The immorality there is sexual immorality. Okay, so they, that is those of Sodom and Gomorrah, engaged in what? In the same immorality, the sexual immorality, as the angels did. The angels went after strange flesh, and they are exhibited as an example in undergoing the punishment of eternal fire. The fact that Sodom and Gomorrah is linked to the sexual immorality with the angels is proof that indeed these angels in Genesis 6 really did impregnate women. I wouldn't believe it if the text of Scripture didn't teach it. But that's exactly what the Scriptures are teaching. The link is too powerful there. You can't get around it. You have divine commentary in the New Testament as to what occurred. So why am I laboring that? Because these angels, that is the wicked demons, remember there's two. There's the active ones because they didn't go after women. They're still active. But there's a separate group that went after women. Those are the ones that are locked away in the abyss. That's precisely the location, this abyss and the eternal bonds, in which Satan will be locked away for 1,000 years prior to him being released for a short time to launch that final rebellion of Battle of Gog and Magog. And then after that, he's thrown into what? The eternal fire in the eternal states. Okay, so again, if you don't have the understanding of the divine counsel, you won't understand the abyss. And therefore, you won't understand, in my opinion, eschatology. All right? Okay, now let's talk a little bit more about this. I want to show you here 1 Peter chapter 3 first, and then we'll talk about 2 Peter. 1 Peter 3, 18 through 19. Notice here Peter talks about the same event. He says, for Christ also died for sins once for all, the just for the unjust. There's the idea of substitution, so that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit, in which also he went and made proclamation to the spirits now in prison. Now, let's stop here. So the idea is that he was put to death, Jesus was, in the flesh, just simply means in the body, in this instance, but he was made alive in the Spirit. Remember I mentioned in previous messages that the Spirit is a higher order existence. It does not mean that Jesus did not have a physical resurrected body. It meant that his new spiritual body It didn't have the limitations as the old one. Remember, he could appear and reappear in rooms. But he also said, hey, I have flesh and bone. I'm not a spirit. A spirit does not have flesh and bone as I have. He could eat with them. He could talk with them. They could touch him. But yet he wasn't limited as the old fleshly body. Okay, so why is Peter making that point? Because it's in this new sphere of existence that what? He made a proclamation to the spirits now in prison. This proclamation, by the way, is not a, hey, by the way, you sorry demons, if you repent, you'll come and you come to faith in me, you're going to have salvation. No, it's not that proclamation. It's a proclamation of victory. In Christ's resurrection and ascension, in that realm, in the spirit, that again, it's the realm that we can't see, but Christ's physically resurrected body was in that sphere. He was making a proclamation of victory to what? The spirits now in prison. Well, what spirits in what prison? The demons who went after women in Genesis 6 who are locked away in the abyss. That's what he's making that's who he's making a proclamation to. Now, how do we know that? Well, notice verse 20 describes these demons, these spirits in prison. It says, who once were disobedient when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah. Aha, the days of Noah. That's again an allusion back to the Genesis 6 angels. That's the time period. The ones who went after women. And again, he says, during the construction of the ark, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely in the water. My point, dear ones, is that the spirits now in prison, they are the demons who went after women, and they're in the abyss. The very same abyss that Satan is going to be locked away in for 1,000 years. So if the demons can't get out of this unless they're let out by God, well, then neither can Satan. Okay, and so just as these demons cannot have access to affect people or things, Satan won't be able to affect people or things during the 1,000 years. Okay, so I hope you're following me. Now let's go to 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. And again, this reiterates the same doctrine that we've just been talking about. Notice here, Peter says, and I like the Lexham English Bible because it renders Tartarus literally. It says, for if God did not spare the angels who sinned. Now let's stop there. Which angels who sinned? Well, not just all angels, but specifically the angels that went after women. Why? Again, the demons of Genesis 6. Because these are the ones who were held captive in Tartarus. And it says, with chains of darkness, and handed them over to be kept for judgment. So notice, Tartarus is not the final judgment in hell. Okay, when does the final judgment in hell happen? That happens during the eternal states. Okay, so in your scheme, get rid of the eternal states. That's not where Tartarus is. Well, obviously, Tartarus isn't on the earth. This is synonymous with the abyss. How do we know that? Because in Greek mythology, and yes, Peter would have been aware of some of these terms because the Hebrews use the terms as well. Tartarus, by the way, Tartarus is not a fish sauce. You know, the tartar sauce, it's not that. Tartarus in Greek mythology was the lowest part of the underworld where the Titans were imprisoned. So remember, even as we look at the flood, when you examine the flood, you realize that most cultures have some sort of flood narrative. They're not inspired as the Bible's flood narrative is, but they still, even the pagans, knew that this occurred historically. You look at the Enuma Elish, you look at, there's even pagans in the Americas that have accounts of the flood. Okay, well, in the same way, even the Greeks had an account of these angelic beings who went after women in Genesis 6. Now, they claim that the angels came down to Mount Olympus, and the race that they created of men were called Titans. Now, why am I laboring that? I'm just showing you that even in Greek mythology, they're trying to explain, I believe, something that actually occurs in the Bible. Now, the Bible is inspired, not Greek mythology, but the Greeks are trying to understand this. Again, in the darkness, they tried the best they could, but the Bible gives you its straight divine revelation that these angels who went after women in Genesis 6 are in Tartarus, which is synonymous with what? The abyss, where Satan will be thrown in Revelation 20, verses 1 through 3. Okay, so when we look at the different terms for the abyss, the main one that's used is abyssos. You'll see that in Luke 8:31. I'm not giving you all the verses, but Revelation 9:1, by the way, God will let them out. He'll have an angel actually let the demons out of the abyss for a time, and they'll actually kill a third of mankind. Why? Why is God going to allow these demons out of the abyss during the day of the Lord in the future 70th week of Daniel? Because unregenerate humanity wants it. They want to have tangible contact with these beings. That's the point of their idolatry. And so as if God says, you want it so bad, here you're going to get it. So no, dear ones, if you don't have an understanding of the abyss and Tartarus and all these, you're not going to understand the book of Revelation. That's one of my big problems with amillennialism and postmillennialism. They don't really deal with this. Now, when you get to Revelation 20, verse 3, this is precisely where Satan is going to be kept. For when? 1,000 years. He won't be able to do anything to anyone. He certainly can now. Now, notice it's not only the Abusos, but Tartarus. It's called this in 2 Peter 2:4 that we just looked at. And Phulake, that is the prison that Peter was referring to. That's the abyss. And so just as some of the angels, again, the wicked ones, the demons, the subset, who went after women, just as they were locked away in the abyss, Satan will be in Revelation 20, verses 1 through 3. Obviously, as these demons can't affect anyone or anything because they've been locked away, Satan won't be able to do that either. And that's why it's laughable that the amillennialist and the postmillennialist says, oh, yeah, Satan, he's bound now during the church age, but he can still affect people. They don't understand the abyss. That's not true. Okay, so let's keep going. Some people will say when I talk about these wicked demons who went after women and they actually impregnated them, they create the Nephilim, that this is something that's just so appalling they won't believe it. And after all, they'll say, Eric, don't you know that Jesus prohibits such an idea? Because here as he's debating with the Sadducees who deny the resurrection, Jesus said in Matthew 22:30, he says, for in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the angels in heaven. This is the idea of the Levirate marriage. Remember the Sadducees say there's a wife who's married to seven brothers because they keep dying. Then they ask the question, well, whose wife is she going to be in heaven? And that's supposed to stump Jesus, proving that there's no afterlife. Well, Jesus simply says, well, in the resurrection, they're not going to marry nor be given in marriage, but are like the angels in heaven. Some surmise from this statement that this proves that angels can't procreate, that they couldn't have sexual relations with women. That's the idea. But let me explain why there's no contradiction between Jesus saying this in Matthew 22:30 and that the New Testament teaches that, yes, there were some angels, demons, fallen angels, who did in the past go after women. Let me prove that to you. Number one, the angels in heaven never have and never will engage in the boundary crossing act of sexual intercourse with humans. That's why that's not a contradiction. Again, Jesus isn't saying that in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the demons in the abyss. He says, but they're like the angels in heaven. No, the angels never did and never have and never will engage in sexual intercourse with human beings. Okay? The second reason why this is no contradiction is the demons, however, did engage in sexual immorality in the past. So, again, for there to be a true contradiction, you have to have, remember, a true contradiction is if A, then not non-A at the same time in the same relationship. Obviously, we're talking about two different sets of angels. The good angels never had and never will engage in that behavior. Number two, the wicked angels, a subset of them, not all of them, but a subset of them did do this, okay, in Noah's day. Third, therefore, there's no contradiction when Christ says that those resurrected are like the angels in heaven. One other point I want to make is notice the are. It's actually a present active indicative form of ami, to be presently like the angels in heaven who don't procreate, never have, never will. That's exactly what we'll be like in the afterlife. We won't be procreating anymore. Again, there's no contradiction. Just to say that the angels, one subset of the demons, did so in the past does not mean that the good angels are like that now. So again, dear ones, I don't think that this washes to say that Matthew 22:30 prohibits the idea that in the past a subset of demonic beings, again, wicked fallen angels, did impregnate women. Again, there's just no contradiction between Matthew 22:30 and what the rest of the New Testament teaches regarding these demons of Genesis 6. Okay? All right, we had to handle that. Now, the abyss isn't where demons normally operate. And this is very important because the amillennial claim, in fact, I'll read to you a quote from Beale. He's a amillennialist scholar. And then another one named Riddlebarger. Beale, in his commentary in the book of Revelation on page 987 and Riddlebarger on page 237, they're both amillennialists, and both of them claim that, quote, the abyss is the spiritual sphere in which the devil and his accomplices normally operate, unquote. Again, that's from Beale, page 987, but Riddlebarger has the same idea, page 237. I think Sam Storms, again, a very good amillennialist, has the same view. Let me read you that again. What is the abyss? For the amillennialist, again, for Beale, Riddlebarger, the best scholars that they have, Storms, they say, quote, it's the spiritual sphere in which the devil and his accomplices normally operate, unquote. Let's unpack that. If the spiritual sphere in which the devil and the demons normally operate gives them access to the earth, what the amillennialist is saying is that being locked in the abyss gives them access to the earth. I'm going to show you that that's not possible. There's a passage that disproves that very, very succinctly. Let's look at Luke 8:30 through 31. Remember, this is where there's this demon-possessed man, the legion, because there's so many of them. And notice the encounter with Jesus. It says, and Jesus asked him, what is your name, this demon-possessed man? And he said, Legion, for many demons had entered him. They were imploring him not to command them to go away into the abyss. Now, who's the they that were imploring Jesus? Well, the demons. And what were they imploring Jesus not to do? Well, they didn't want to be sent into the abyss. Okay, now this is a big problem for the amillennialist. Because again, the amillennialist is claiming that the abyss is the arena in which the demons normally operate. In other words, they have access to the earth. But the problem with that, of course, is if the abyss is the realm in which demons normally operate, then how could the demons in Luke 8:31 plead for Christ not to send them to the abyss? Would the demons not be saying, please don't send us to the place where we already are? Again, one scholar had an analogy. He said it's like capturing a shark and then saying, well, I'm going to put the shark in the prison. Where are you going to put, what prison are you going to put the shark in? The Pacific Ocean, where I caught him. Well, that's not a prison. That's where he normally operates. That's really what the amillennialist is claiming. It's absurd. How could the demons be saying, don't send us to where we already are? That doesn't make any sense. No, the abyss obviously must be a prison in which they'll be locked away, unable to influence anything or anyone. That's why they don't want to go there. They want to keep doing their dastardly deeds. So, this is a big problem. The abyss is a prison for demonic beings that had physical relations with women. That's what it is. That's what I just laid out for you. Okay, that's why they don't want to be locked away in there. All right, so Satan must be locked into the same prison according to Revelation 20 verses 1 through 3. When he's locked in there, he's not going to have access to anyone. He won't be able to prowl around seeking whom he may devour. He won't be able to blind the unbeliever's mind to the truth of the gospel. He won't be able to do those things. And again, the amillennialist claims the only thing that Satan can't do is lead a final catastrophic assault against the church. That's nonsense. It's nonsense. Again, I made the analogy, if you put a murderer in prison for murder, it doesn't mean that he's free to steal. Yes, Satan will not be able to lead any final assault against the church, that's true, but he won't be able to affect anything or anyone. Why? He's locked away in the abyss. It's sealed over him. It's shut over him. That's the imagery that John uses in Revelation 20 verses 1 through 3. Now, here's what I'm going to show you. This is a big thing here. I want you to see that the abyss isn't earth. That is, if the demons and Satan are in the abyss, they don't have access to earth, but it's also not hell. And again, that's a big problem for the amillennialist. It shows that amillennialism is not plausible. There's a contradiction with amillennialism and postmillennialism. Here's why. The abyss is the temporal holding place for demonic beings awaiting final sentence to hell. I've showed you that in the passages in this study. The amillennial claim, again, is the abyss is the spiritual sphere in which the devil and his accomplices normally operate. Well, that would mean it's on the earth. If they're in the abyss, they still have access to the earth. Now, here's the problem with this. Luke 8:31, again, they were imploring him, these demons, not to send them into what? The abyss. They would be saying then, don't send us to where we already are. Okay, well, that's an absurdity. So obviously, if they're in the abyss, that can't be the earth because they were already affecting a man on the earth. So again, if they're on the earth, they can't be claiming that the abyss gives them access to the earth. That would be an absurdity. Lord, don't send us where we already are. That would be what the demons are saying. Okay, so the amillennial claim makes no sense. All right, now what's more, Jude 6, remember it says the angels who did not keep their own domain but abandoned their proper abode, he has kept in eternal bonds under darkness for the judgment of the great day. The eternal bonds, that's in the abyss. They're awaiting what? The judgment in the lake of fire on the great day. Okay, now hold on to that. 2 Peter 2:4 says the same thing. For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but held them captive in Tartarus, again, these eternal bonds, same idea, chains of darkness, and handed them over for what? To be kept until the time of judgment. So here's the point. The abyss is not the eternal judgment. The abyss doesn't give you access to the earth, so it can't be during the church age. But it's not the judgment in the great day in the eternal states. So if it's not during the church age, which is the millennial kingdom for the amillennialist and the postmillennialist, and it can't be in the eternal states because that's when Satan is going to be thrown into the lake of fire, they have no time period for Satan to be bound. That means postmillennialism and amillennialism is false. It's a $3 bill. It's as phony. It's phony. We'll just leave it at that. I'm too tired to come up with a better analogy. It's a $3 bill. All right, well, let's keep going. One more slide. The abyss isn't the earth, and it's not hell. Let me show you the problem. And I'm using the amillennialist scheme down here, and again, postmillennialist scheme is very similar. If the abyss is the earth where the demons normally operate, why do the demons again implore Jesus not to cast them into the abyss? They'd be saying, don't send us where we already are. Okay, it's an absurdity. Number two, the amillennial scheme would have us believe that the demons are saying, don't cast us to the place where we already are. I mentioned that. Number three, the abyss also cannot be hell, since both Jude 6 and 2 Peter 2:4 list the abyss as the place of temporary confinement of the demons until they are given the final judgment in hell. Now don't worry, I'm going to point this all out on the timeline. So if the abyss isn't the earth, therefore we don't have access during the church age, and it can't be hell during the eternal states, when could the binding of Satan occur in the amillennial scheme? Remember, this is all they have. They have the church age, which they believe is the millennium. Remember, it's figurative to them. It's the church age, and they have the eternal states. This is the second coming of Christ right here. So what do they have? They have the church age and the eternal states. That's all they have. Well, the eternal states is where Satan and the demons are all thrown into the lake of fire. So we know that can't be where he's bound in the abyss in Revelation 20 verses 1 through 3. But we also know it can't be during the church age. Why? Because the abyss doesn't give you access to the earth. Are you with me? Satan currently has access to the earth. He prowls around seeking whom he may devour. That is not the abyss. So the abyss can't be the earth, and it can't be hell. Therefore, you don't have a period under the amillennial and postmillennial scheme for the binding of Satan. Again, all they have is the church age, where again, Satan would have to have access to the earth while bound in the abyss. Well, that's impossible. Again, Luke 8:31. They're not in the abyss. They're on the earth. They've infiltrated a human being. They say, Lord, don't send us into the abyss. Obviously, the abyss is not the earth. Okay? Well, during the church age, the demons and Satan have access to the earth, the ones that aren't locked away in the abyss. Right? So again, we can't believe that the abyss is occurring during the church age. Well, we know it can't occur during the eternal states. Again, why? Because all of them will be in the lake of fire. They're all in the lake of fire. So again, without a millennial kingdom, as we premillennialists say there must be, There's no time period in which Satan can be locked in the abyss, not affecting anyone or anything. Dear ones, I don't know how the amillennialists and the postmillennials get around this. I really don't. And that's why in good conscience I can never be one, because their view doesn't make sense. The absurdities are too great. Now, I'm going to have a bonus round here coming up pretty soon. I'll be getting another video out for Memorial Day. God bless all of you great patriots and soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines who fought for our country. I'm going to be giving you a bonus round because I know so many of my fellow Christians love eschatology. So during Memorial Weekend, I want to get you some more things to consider. We'll be showing you other problems with amillennialism and postmillennialism, and why indeed there must be a future 1,000-year reign of Christ for a person to really make sense of what the Bible is teaching. God bless all of you. We'll catch you next time on End Times with Pastor Eric.